Welcome. My name is Meredith Bailey, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Cleburne Pregnancy Center. I'm so glad you've joined us. I'm excited for the opportunity to celebrate life with you and to share with you about the ministry of Cleburne Pregnancy Center. Cleburne Pregnancy Center is a Christian ministry in its 33rd year of faithfully executing its mission to provide help and hope to women and men experiencing unplanned pregnancy by offering medical services, including pregnancy tests and sonograms, referrals, resources, prenatal and parenting education, and the emotional and spiritual support necessary to help them say yes to life for their unborn babies. There's been a lot going on here over the past year that I really want to tell you about, but before we get into that, let's get things started off right. I've invited Cody Hughes, Senior Pastor of the Heights Church, to open us in a word of prayer.
Hello everyone, I just want to welcome you to Cleburne Pregnancy Center Virtual Gala. I'm so glad you're a part of this event, and we're so excited about what's going to take place here in the next few minutes as we gather together. We're so excited about ministries like the Pregnancy Center that help young women choose life for their children and to help those mothers decide to deliver those babies. And not only that, Cleburne Pregnancy Center goes way beyond just helping mothers make great decisions, but they also help them as they come alongside them and become a support system to them and a strength to them, even encourage them to get involved in other ministries that will help them continue in making great decisions. And so you get to be a part of this tonight. I pray that generosity of God would just come upon you to really pray about what you could do to make a difference in saving the lives of so many children. So we just want to open this up with prayer as we get started. Father, thank you for every person that is joining us around the world for this virtual gala. And Lord, I pray as we enter in tonight, as we begin to hear stories and just sense in our heart what you're doing, Lord, I pray that you would help us to know what you would have us to do to be a part of saving the lives of these children. Lord, we thank you for that opportunity. We thank you for the resources, the blessings, the favor upon our lives. So Lord, I pray blessings over every person that is a part of this event. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor Cody. And thank you to all the pastors and churches throughout our community who have stood with us to promote a culture of life and compassion for those we serve. Our services have always been free of charge, covered by the generous donations of our community. I want to acknowledge our many local businesses who have sponsored both this virtual event as well as the scaled-back in-person event that recently took place. It's been a challenge for everyone this last year with the pandemic, but God has continued to provide through the faithfulness of our familiar donors as well as a number of new ones. If you're new to this ministry, I want to welcome you and encourage you to get involved. There are many opportunities for involvement, from committing to pray for the ministry, which is vital, to participating in fundraising events such as this one, or volunteering in various capacities at the center. We absolutely could not accomplish all that we do without our volunteers who show up each week to minister the love and life of Jesus Christ to many who are aching to hear good news. The women we see often feel that their unplanned pregnancy is the end of their world. They may feel pressured to abort, or they may feel there's simply no other real option for them. Our volunteers and staff listen to their fears and situations, never judging, and help them to gain perspective, helping them to make their decisions from a place of peace and not of panic. We all know that our best decisions are never made in turmoil. Ephesians 6:15 encourages us to stand firm with your feet fitted with the readiness of the gospel of peace. It is in this ministering of the gospel of peace that mommies and daddies find their best decisions and miracles happen. A mother's fear turns to courage, a father's heart opens to his child, and a baby's life is rescued from the threat of abortion. This past year, we saw 276 women who were likely to choose abortion. Because we were here to provide what they needed, I'm thrilled to share with you that 97% of them chose life for their babies. We had the honor of working with 528 women, serving with medical services and options counseling. We were able to share the gospel with over half of them and saw many commit their lives to Christ. Our services are also confidential, but oh how I wish you could experience firsthand what goes on in those counseling rooms so you could see and hear for yourself how despair turns to hope and tears turn to smiles when these young women receive the support and resources they need. You can't be that fly on the wall, but our volunteers and staff are going to give you that next best experience by sharing remembrances that have touched them.
She was in her mid-20s, and she was living with her parents.
She's 22 years old, just getting out of an abusive relationship.
She was afraid of being a single parent and being able to afford a baby.
She was terrified that her mother was going to kick her out.
Her greatest concern was the fact that she was homeless and she was just going from couch to couch.
She needed to know she had options she could live with.
She was so sad and worried, and her mother was with her and sad and worried as well.
I told her, you are not alone in this.
We met with her and her mom and helped them come together.
She needed someone to be there for her at that moment.
She needed hope. She needed hope that things were going to be okay.
I told her we were here to support her spiritually and emotionally.
When she saw the baby and through the ultrasound, she cried and smiled.
Well, when her mother was with us and when they first saw the baby, they giggled and they smiled. But when they heard the baby's heartbeat, they cried.
When she heard the heartbeat, she was overwhelmed with tears of joy.
We were able to really help her with material needs.
We connected her with Embrace Grace.
We referred her to a ministry that would house her, clothe her, give her encouragement, and help set her on the right path to a great future.
We provided her with resources and classes on parenting to help build her confidence as a parent.
So she was at peace knowing that she wasn't alone through this process.
She was so grateful. She felt hopeful.
So not only did she receive the necessary things that she needed, she also received Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior.
She chose life.
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 The Cleburne Pregnancy Center is hope for the hopeless, love for the unloved.
The Cleburne Pregnancy Center is God's love poured out.
To me, the Cleburne Pregnancy Center is a corner of hope.
The Cleburne Pregnancy Center, to me, is hope. It is life worth defending.
As we forge ahead this year, we're working on an aggressive marketing campaign to reach more abortion-minded women. We're also planning to spread awareness about abortion pill reversal. Abortion pill reversal? What's that all about? I've invited a special guest to explain more. Her name is Rebecca Hagan. It's my pleasure to introduce Rebecca to you. She is one of today's youngest speakers on the issues of teenage pregnancy, abortion, and abortion pill reversal. A passionate advocate for grace-centered outreach, Rebecca Hagan uses her story to unravel the mindset of women in unplanned pregnancies and to equip and encourage others to lead with hope and compassion.
Hey Kirk and Meredith, and greetings to all of my new friends that are watching and attending to celebrate the Cleburne Pregnancy Center this year and all that they are doing to reach women and girls just like me. Now, what do I mean by that? Reaching girls and young women just like me. You see, when I was 18, I found out that I was pregnant with my second child. In fact, I will never forget the day that I sat in a dirty, public grocery store restroom staring at a positive pregnancy test because I didn't know about places like the Cleburne Pregnancy Center in my community. I sat there alone and scared, thinking this cannot be happening to me again. I was living in my parents' home. I was a newly single mom of a 10-month-old baby boy named Eli, who I would have given the world for. I was a college freshman at Sacramento State University. At the time, things were looking up for a girl like me, a young teen mom. I was proving everyone in my life around me wrong. And unfortunately, here I was pregnant again. I feared my dad would kick me out, as he promised he always would if I ever had another unplanned pregnancy under his roof. And in a moment of fear and desperation, and certainly not empowerment, I pictured Eli, my young son, and I losing it all. I pictured having to drop out of college. I pictured being a young, broke, single mom in a rundown apartment with a child who never would have a father, because no man would love a girl with so much baggage, as the world calls it. And I thought abortion seemed like hope, like a way out, like a compassionate choice, and a way for me to spare my parents from any more shame and embarrassment and problems, and a way to spare my son from any more potential suffering that would come with me having another child. And that's when I chose abortion. Before even leaving this grocery store bathroom is when I chose abortion. I turned to my phone searching for an answer, and I quickly found out about a chemical abortion regimen, which you may have heard of. Chemical abortion. Sometimes it's called a medication abortion, or even simply just the abortion pill. Those three are the exact same. Now, not to be confused with what we call Plan B, the morning after pill, or backup birth control. This is not that. A chemical abortion or medication abortion is a FDA approved regimen, a self-managed or DIY, do-it-yourself abortion is what many people call them, because so much of the process actually takes place at home with no medical supervision. And honestly, they market it as safe, as convenient, as less invasive. There's no surgery or tools. There's no sedation. You can go back to work or school the very next day. But it is an actual abortion process, legal from 4 weeks gestation and pregnancy all the way up to 10 weeks or 2.5 months gestation and pregnancy. And during COVID, many states have even increased it to 11 weeks, almost 3 months gestation and pregnancy, to have a chemical abortion. In the last few weeks, we've also seen many abortion providers market this chemical abortion as the 10-week after pill and missed period pills, which is incredibly deceiving and confusing for young women. It really is no surprise that, considering the deception and the downplayment of what a chemical abortion is, it's really no surprise that this is now accounting for 40% or 400,000 of the 1 million elective abortions that occur in our country each year. Of course, I didn't know any of this. It seemed easier, seemed more simple, less invasive, and the first clinic I sought out to actually go through with this process was so cold and brief, but still I would have started my abortion that day had they not told me they didn't give the abortion pill on Friday or leading into a weekend. I walked into my final appointment, this time at a Planned Parenthood clinic, because they seemed more reputable and more trustworthy, on March 13th of 2013. I was pulled back into one of the final rooms with a clinic worker who basically told me everything I had already read online. She reassured and calmed my fears, and then told me that I would take the first abortion pill, called mifepristone or RU486, in the clinic, and that this would simply end my pregnancy. Then she told me that she was going to send me home with a second set of pills called misoprostol, and that this, 24 hours later, I would take it in the comfort of my own home, that this would expel my pregnancy. Folks, I didn't think to ask. I was a young, scared, 18, almost 19-year-old girl who didn't know much about the medical industry. I didn't think to ask, how does this work? What I know now is that chemical abortion has resulted in multiple women hemorrhaging, and some have even passed away. That first pill, mifepristone, the abortion pill, the way it works is it deprives a growing baby of progesterone. Without progesterone, a baby dies. And 24 hours later, I was being sent home with a drug called misoprostol, and it didn't just expel a pregnancy the way she said. Misoprostol is often given to women in active labor for childbirth. It causes their cervix to dilate and their body to contract to deliver a fully formed baby. Unbeknownst to me, I was being sent home and instructed to send myself into labor with no medical supervision while my parents slept and while my parents thought I was sleeping, and to instead be inducing labor in the upstairs bathroom over the toilet. As you can imagine, that is traumatic. After I took this first abortion pill, I was told there was no going back, and I walked to my car with this brown paper bag, much like what you would pack your child's lunch in, and I sat down, started going through it, and it hit me. Grief, guilt, and regret set in, and it was as if you picture yourself walking down a very dark path, you're scared, you're trying to navigate it alone, you can't see very well. What are you looking for? You're looking for hope, for light, for a way out. That's what I thought was waiting for me on the other side of this abortion decision. And instead, I made that decision. I took that pill. I made that choice. I chose abortion. And it wasn't light that was waiting for me. It was as if Satan himself blew out all the candles and said, "Gotcha. Gotcha. Now you know pain and now you know shame. I got you to stray away from the Lord, and it wasn't light you were following. It was darkness. But thankfully, I don't serve a God of darkness. I serve a God of light, and that's what God had to offer me. I prayed and I asked for a way out. And then I turned to my phone, at least this time I prayed first, and I actually found abortionpillreversal.com. It was manned by a pregnancy center, something I had never heard of, and I called the hotline. The nurse reassured me. She calmed me down. She affirmed me and spoke with peace and assurance. She asked me questions that the abortion clinic never did. Things like, who are you? How did you get here? Do you know how a chemical abortion works? Why did you think this was your only option? And these are the same questions that the Cleburne Pregnancy Center advocates ask girls in your community who walk through their doors so that they never end up in a situation like me, having just chosen to have an abortion. After she calmed my nerves, she told me about something called abortion pill reversal, which was an attempt to outcompete the abortion pill by getting progesterone back into my body. Of course, Planned Parenthood said this would never ever work, and if it did, my baby would have severe anomalies. I'm so excited to tell you that not only did it work, my son, my second little boy, was born on October 20th of 2013, but Planned Parenthood was completely wrong. My son was and still is perfectly healthy. He will soon turn 8 years old. He is in first grade, excelling in academics. He plays baseball and football, and he is an absolute joy. And I'm so thrilled to tell you that after Zachariah was born, and to date, 2,000 other children have been born as a result of abortion pill reversal. And Cleburne Pregnancy Center is acting as a resource for girls in your community who, if they have taken the first abortion pill and regret their decision, they're referring them to the hotline, the same number I called, and getting them the help quickly that they need so that women in your community can make a second chance choice for life. Friends, there are so many Rebeccas, so many women just like me in your community out there that are being reached by the Cleburne Pregnancy Center instead of being reached by the abortion clinics as I was. And I'm so excited and just proud of the work that your pregnancy center is doing. I am going to turn it right back over to my dear friend Kirk, who is going to share an awesome message with you. And at the end, he'll reiterate why it's so important to support the Cleburne Pregnancy Center and the work that they're doing. Just remember, the girls in your community want to say yes to life, but their yes depends on your yes.
Rebecca, thank you for that powerful testimony. As you can see, there is so much work to be done. At a time when funding for abortion through the latest pandemic relief bill threatens to expand abortion, we must not grow discouraged. As Christians, we know that despite discouraging setbacks, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So we press forward with the good news of life and life abundant in Christ. Now is the time to encourage ourselves in the Lord. Isaiah 42, 3-4 tells us, "In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged until he establishes justice on earth." This is our example, and we intend to follow it. Our keynote speaker tonight is Kirk Walden, a former pregnancy center director and author of the book, The Wall. In addition, Kirk is an advancement specialist for Heartbeat International, the world's largest affiliate network of pregnancy help organizations. Kirk is also a humorist and a writer whose perspective on faith and life can be found at kirkwalden.com. and the Faith Revolution podcast. Kirk serves pregnancy help ministries as an encourager, coach, and confidant. Kirk brings to us a unique perspective on the future of our ministry and a bigger picture of the powerful impact of pregnancy help ministries. Quietly and effectively, our ministry and others like ours are creating a new culture of life in America. You are about to find out how.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this virtual fundraising gala. When I say it's an honor and a privilege, I really mean it, because I'm probably one of the least likely people that should be on this screen in front of you tonight. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But it matters to me. And I also want to say thank you because I know it matters to you if you're watching tonight. You could be doing a lot of other things, but you're either at home watching this on a laptop or a computer or on a big screen somewhere, or you're at a watch party, or you're in a small group watching this. But wherever you are, you could be doing something else tonight, but you're here. And so I know that you're committed to the Cleburne Pregnancy Center, and I know you're committed to the sanctity of life, so I know who I'm talking to tonight. It's just us. And so I kind of want this to be an intimate few minutes together. I want to be vulnerable with you. I want to be real with you. And I want you to be encouraged when we get done. So we're just going to talk about a couple of things tonight. Not much, just a couple of things. I want to talk a little bit about me and how I got here, and then about where we're going, where the pro-life community is going, and what we're doing, because I truly believe we are on the verge. It's funny, because with all the political winds and social winds seem to be blowing against us, I believe we're on the verge of turning all of this upside down. I really do, and we'll talk about that as well. So first, a little bit about me, and then I want to encourage you as we go forward. So first, a little bit about me. And I truly am one of the least likely people who should be talking to you tonight. I didn't even know what pro-life was when I was growing up. I didn't grow up in a home where faith was a big deal. Didn't go to church much. My mom went to church, but I didn't follow her there. My dad went to the golf course, and so that's where I ended up going most of my days. I didn't even become a Christian until I was 17 years old as a senior in high school in 1980. But then in the fall of 1980, all of this began to change. A pastor shared a message on the sanctity of life. Here I was, a brand new Christian, and I wanted to do something big for God, right? Well, that message kind of changed my life right there. In fact, it did change my life. I just need to lay that out there. It changed everything about where I was going. I was planning on being a professional golfer, but included in that, after that message, I asked the Lord to put me on the front line in defending life. I thought He would use my platform as a golfer. The Lord would use that for me to proclaim the sanctity of life and all those things. I didn't end up being much of a good professional golfer, so I had to retire from that pretty quickly. But my prayer remained that I would be on the front line in defending life. And I really believed that answer was Washington, D.C. And believe me, I support those who are in the public square, those who are on the front line in Washington doing what they do, and at our state capitals, Austin and all around the country. I really believe they're doing God's work when they stand for life. But I thought that was my destiny. I thought I'd end up in Washington. You'll see behind me, there's a portrait of the White House and a proclamation from a congresswoman. I really believe that was where my answer was. That was where I needed to be. And again, that's important stuff. But I'm going to shift that narrative here in just a few minutes, so keep that in mind. But I thought that was the front line. That's where I needed to be. So for 10 years, that was my prayer, until the director of the pregnancy center, where I grew up in Alabama, he left to go to another larger pregnancy center. And he asked me, as he was leaving, he said, would you consider putting your name before the board as a candidate for this position? And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anything about what pregnancy centers did. I knew just enough. I supported it monthly. I knew they gave out diapers and wipes and did all these nice things. I know they shared the gospel of Christ, and that was important to me. But in this whole pro-life thing, I didn't see its great value. I thought it's good, it's great, but if I'm going to be on the front line, it's not at a pregnancy center. But as a favor to him, I said, yeah, I'll put my name in. As I went through the interview process, my heart began to build in my desire to serve in this capacity. But to be real with you, and I've been praying, just be vulnerable, Kirk, but to be real with you, I really believe this was just a stepping stone. I'd do this for a couple of years, and then I would move on to the big time. I was in Alabama, I'd go to Montgomery, or I'd go to Washington, run for office, something I didn't know. But this was only a way station to do the big things. That was what I believed. But going through that interview process, my desire to be involved in this ministry did begin to rise. And you talk about least likely, here's what I told the board. They asked me what my strengths were in one of those interviews, but when they asked me what my weaknesses were, and here I stumble on my words as I'm about to tell you this, it's kind of apropos. Well, I told them I had two weaknesses. I said, one is public speaking. I said, I know if you're the director, you need to stand up in front of people at the banquet and things like that. Oh, I'm just not a public speaker. Not my thing. Can't do it. And you probably just figured that out as I stumble over the words and stuff. But the second thing I told them is I'm not a fundraiser. I get nervous asking people for money. I just get sick to my stomach. I just can't do that. But I will try. And here I am 30 years later. It was 30 years ago this spring that I walked into the pregnancy center as an executive director, as their executive director. First time I walked in any capacity, and here I was leading the ministry 30 years ago this spring. And what do I do now? I speak at events like this, and I help pregnancy centers in raising funds. Talk about where we're weak. Somehow the Lord has built in me, I don't know about abilities or whatever, but for some reason it's worked out that I get to do these two things. So I will tell you this. This is my encouragement as I tell you my story. If there's anything that you say, I could never do that. Maybe it's involvement with the center in some way. Oh, I could never do that. If you say that, just know that gives God a great opportunity to say, I can work with this person. They're not all built up in what they think they can do. I can work through them because where they are weak, I can be strong. And so I get nervous even talking on camera like this. But even though I get a little bit nervous, this matters to me. And I don't care if I flub a word or two. I don't care if I don't ask for funds in the right way because I know God is really big and He will work through those weaknesses and I won't get a puffed up head in the process, I guess. So that's a little bit of my story getting involved. So when I tell you this matters to me tonight, this virtual event matters to me tonight, it really does because I believe, and this is the encouragement part, the encouragement half, if you will, I truly believe that with all this stuff going on, both politically and in public policy, it seems all these winds are blowing against us. I truly believe that this is a time that God could use to flip all of this. I believe the day could come when the last place where you can end a pregnancy closes its doors. That number used to be more than 2,000 back in 1980, and now it's less than 800 today. And there used to be, back in about 1980 when I first found out what it meant to be pro-life, there may be a couple of hundred pregnancy help ministries like Cleburne Pregnancy Center. Now that number 200 is 2,750. I think we're a sleeping giant. And I truly believe we could turn this culture toward life because if we become the first choice for those facing unexpected pregnancies, if Cleburne Pregnancy Center is the first choice in Johnson County, that second choice will disappear. They won't travel to go into pregnancy because we're already here. We're already helping them. And when we become that first choice, that second choice disappears. I believe this is happening all across the country. That's why the numbers of places where you end a pregnancy keep dropping. We keep rising. And I believe we're on the verge of something great, which I really want to encourage you. We can do this. When I say we can do this, a lot of people ask how. And then they'll also say, but Kirk, we're in a time now, it's only going to get worse. Society is going to keep going downhill. And I say, you may be right. But at the same time, I want to talk about something that happened centuries and centuries ago that tell me we can still turn this around. If we go back to the very first century. Let's go back to ancient Rome. Let's go back to those first Christians and what they were dealing with. You talk about political winds being against them. They didn't have a vote. They didn't have anything. If there was something they didn't like, they couldn't call their congressman. They couldn't vote in the next election. They had no rights. They were under Roman rule. These first Christians saw a problem, and that was this. In Roman society, it was not a custom, but it was an accepted practice that if you had a child that you didn't want, could be for gender reasons, could be for financial reasons, it could be because the child wasn't perfect. There was something viewed as wrong with this child. If for any of those reasons or just because you felt like it, the accepted practice was called exposure. Roman families would take these children after they were born. They would take them to a riverbank or to an open field somewhere, and they would simply leave the child there to the elements, to the animals, the elements, anything, and then they would go back home. It was called exposure, and they basically believed that it was leaving it to the fates. Hey, if the child survived, then the fates willed it. But if not, of course, it was always if not. If not, that was up to the fates. They felt no guilt as a society over this practice. It was so common that people even knew where these places were that you would take your child, and so there would be more than one, sometimes out there at the same time. This is what these first Christians faced. This was one of their first social issues to deal with. And like I said, in their case, they couldn't vote for change. They couldn't suggest new laws. They couldn't march. They couldn't do anything. So what did they do? And I think if you've heard of this, you know what they did. They went out and they found those children and they brought them back to their homes. It was basically Christian foster parenting 101, wasn't it? They then adopted these children into their family. Even though they didn't have a lot of resources a lot of times. They were struggling for resources under Roman rule, but they believed that when Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, that was what they were supposed to do. They believed this so much that they were willing to take action. So they went out, they found the babies, and they brought them into their homes. And over time, this began to get noticed by the Roman people. Now, I'm sure in the beginning it was like, oh, these crazy Christians, this group called the Way, they're doing this, that's fine, whatever they want to do, doesn't matter to us either way. But this began to grow, and the Roman people began to take notice. They didn't take notice immediately, but over time, society began to see what these Christians were doing. They were just living out their faith by loving their neighbor. These babies they didn't know, they had never seen before, these were their neighbors. Jesus had taught, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And they took that to heart and lived that out in their lives. Like I said, over time, the Roman society took notice. It took years, decades, centuries. But finally, in 318, Emperor Constantine made infanticide a crime. Took that long. Hundreds of years, but because these Christians kept at it, society finally noticed and said, this is wrong. So 318, Constantine made infanticide an illegal practice. But then in 375, Emperor Valentinian made exposure a capital offense. It took 300 plus years, but they changed their society. Because day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, they stayed faithful to doing the right thing, to loving their neighbor. And you know, this is exactly what we're doing right now. You think about Cleburne Pregnancy Center. And in this case, it's the women who come in our door who are our neighbors. And they're carrying neighbors who will be born soon. And it's our mission. You and me, Cleburne Pregnancy Center, we're all in this together. It's our mission to simply be the Christians that God has called us to be, to love our neighbor. And the interesting thing about this is, it doesn't take Washington to love our neighbor. It really doesn't. Again, I don't want to say that's unimportant. I'm not telling people don't get involved in the political realm. Hey, I'm thankful that we have an opportunity to do that. But folks, what would happen if we took 80% of our time? You ever heard of the Pareto principle? I'm sure you have, where we hear in churches and in businesses, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And 80% of our time, or really 20% of our time at work, is where we do 80% of our work, right? We get done 80% of it in 20% of our time. The other 80%, we're doing things that really don't get the job done. It's tough to hear, but it's very true, and I know it's true in my life. I'm going to ask a question. What would happen if we took 80% of our time and focused, when it comes to the life issue, and focused with 80% of our time on how we could make Cleburne Pregnancy Center the first choice for women facing unexpected pregnancies? And once they come in the door, we spend 80% of our resources and of our efforts, when it comes to life, 80% of our efforts on loving those women and those children, helping them gain a footing, helping them through the adoption process, whatever it is, by loving our neighbor. What if we flip things? Because I really believe, and this is an indictment on me, I spend a lot of my time looking at what's going on in Washington and other things, even though I'm involved in this work every day. What if we took 80% of our time and said, we're going to invest it here. We're going to love our neighbor first. Yeah, we're going to vote on Election Day. We may get involved in campaigns. Who knows what we might do? But 80% of it is right here at the Pregnancy Center. 80% is on making sure we're the first choice. 80%, it may be that you're a professional in some area, a lawyer, an accountant, I don't know. It may be that you're in lawn care. It may be that you're in maintenance, and you go, you know what, I could put some time into the center. I don't know who you are and what you bring to the table, but I guarantee you there is a gift that you could bring to the table. And we'll talk about resources in just a second, but there is a gift that you could bring to the table, I'm sure. If you called up Meredith or emailed the center, dropped by, there is probably a gift that you could bring to the table to help make the Pregnancy Center the first choice. Because if we're the first choice, I truly believe that second choice will disappear. What if we took 80% of our time when it comes to the life issue, 80% of our attention and focus and resources, and placed it in loving our neighbor as ourselves? That neighbor is that hurting woman, maybe your boyfriend, who comes in the door and says, I don't know what to do. If we did that, if every one of us as Christians did that, and maybe you want to share this event with others or what you learned from this event, if every one of us did that, can you imagine the power that would have? I believe we could turn this culture upside down just like they did in the first, second, and third, and fourth centuries. What if we did that? What if that was our focus? I believe we can do this. And it all starts with changing our minds a little bit and saying, this is going to be my focus. This is going to be where I pour the huge majority of my energy is going to be right here. Now, I know this is a gala. It's a fundraising event. So we want to talk about our resources in terms of this as well. So let's jump into that, because if every one of us gives, we can be the first choice. And it won't take everything you have, but if every one of us says we're going to focus on this, we could do things we could not imagine. So let's talk about funding. Look, you wouldn't be watching this if you weren't going to give. I get that. So this is not about whether you give, but really we're in the how much, what works for you as you give, and how to do it. Well, below me is a link. All you need to do is click that link. And I'm going to encourage you. We want to be that first choice. And I'm going to encourage you to join Jennifer and myself, my wife Jennifer and I, in 2 investments in the ministry, a one-time investment and a monthly investment. We'll talk about that in just a second. But let's look at the why. One of the things that Meredith and the team want to do is they want to expand their outreach, their marketing or advertising, to get the right word there. It takes about $30,000 to meet women exactly where they are. 77%, I believe, of women finding pregnancy centers do so on their cell phone. We've got to do the marketing, the outreach, so that we find them right there. When they're Googling certain words, when they're in certain places, like in a school, or thinking about or near a Planned Parenthood, our ads need to pop up. We've got to be there wherever they are. And it takes funds to do that. You know it and I know it. And big tech is really trying to shut us down a little bit, but there are ways around it. But it takes funding to get around it. If we want to be the first choice, it's going to take that. I'll tell you, our budget is $350,000. And so it's going to take each of us doing our part. And I'm not going to ask you to sell your house. If God tells you to, that's fine. Go ahead. But I do ask you to consider 2 investments in the ministry. One is a one-time investment. You go to the link, you go to the site, and it'll show you how to do that. There will be some easy ways to make that one-time investment, and you may want to choose one of your own. There will be some suggestions, but again, you can choose anything you want. But let me ask you to do this. If you're with a spouse, or maybe you're by yourself, think about what is a generous one-time investment for us. If you'll ask that question of God, He will tell you, I promise. And it may be a little more, and it may take a little faith. You know, you may be thinking, well, we'll give $100. We always do that. And He may say, this time, let's do $500. Let's take a little bit of a step of faith. In this pandemic, you know, He's asking us to take steps of faith. Well, He does that sometimes, but He always sees us through. I know that. A one-time investment. You can make that. You can make it a one-time investment. You'll see that on the screen. And once you're finished, it's going to say, thanks for your gift. All done, right? I need you to go back into that link and make a second investment in the ministry. And this is a monthly investment. A recurring gift is what it may say on the screen. If each of us will do that, if each of us will make a recurring monthly gift, we can do so through our checking account, through a credit card, either way. But if each of us will make a monthly investment, I guarantee you, we will make this the largest fundraising event in the history of Cleburne Pregnancy Center. We could raise more than $200,000 if every one of us would say, I can do this each month. And again, it may take a little bit of a step of faith. You may go, we could do this. And the Lord says, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that step of faith? I know He's done that with Jen and I many times. We're like, no. Well, He asks us for a little bit more. And you know what that's all about. You've been there, I know. But if every one of us will make a recurring gift, you think about, well, we could do $50 a month. That's $600 a year. $100 a month is $1,200 a year. And if you're saying, oh gosh, we're living month to month, I don't know if we can do a monthly gift, would you consider and just say, let's just trust God with $25, $35, $45. Let's do that. I promise you, He'll be faithful. I promise you. We've done it too many times. Over the years, Jen and I have supported on a monthly basis at different times more than 300 pregnancy centers with monthly support. We have never wanted. We've come close. I'll be honest with you. It's gotten tight sometimes, but we've never wanted. So I'm going to ask you to join us in both a one-time investment and a monthly investment. And as I said, with the monthly, you got to go back in a second time. It's kind of the extra mile type thing. If we will do this, we could raise more than $200,000 combining our live event and this virtual event. And if we do that, that's nearly 2/3 of our budget. And then we can start thinking in terms of new ideas, new outreaches, new services to reach those and love our neighbor just as those first century Christians did. So we're going to close with that. And I ask you to consider both of these investments. Why don't we ask God? Why don't we pray together, and then I'll cut you loose to make those investments. Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for what you're doing through Cleburne Pregnancy Center. And I pray that you'll show each of us, me included, me and Jen included, what is our one-time investment and what is our monthly investment in this ministry, that you would be honored and you would be glorified. Well, that's it. That's my portion. If each of us gives, we can make this the largest event in our history. So thanks for watching. Thanks for allowing me in your home for a few minutes. I've enjoyed it, and I pray you have as well.